Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Bubble Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuel. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, yesterday evening, East Coast time, um, a, um, a prisoner released that day from Russia arrived in the United States and was welcomed and greeted by not only President Trump but quite a heavyweight congressional delegation. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was there. The congressional delegation from Pennsylvania, Marc Fogel, was there. Fogel spoke quite movingly, very articulately, expressing his gratitude. Um, he had been a diplomat accredited to the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. Then he lost his diplomatic accreditation and became a teacher at the Anglo-American school. But he was arrested when he arrived in Russia, carrying marijuana and hashish oil, and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Quite a harsh sentence obviously a very harsh sentence, but even harsh by Russian standards. And one has to assume that they did it as harshly as that they thought that because he was a school teacher, that he was going to distribute the drugs to the school children, and that given that he had been a diplomat over the previous years, he had essentially been sneaking the drugs in using his diplomatic immunity as a mechanism to do so. I mean, I assume that was the speculation as to why he was hit with this very harsh sentence. So he comes back. Trump speaks very warmly, and now the real question, and apparently a Russian citizen has been released and is on his way to Russia. So I don't know if he's landed in Russia. Russia won't reveal the name of this Russian citizen. So it's a kind of a one-to-one swap, as far as we can tell. But the question is then, does this portend
Yes.
anything of any significance?
Well, before I answer that or speculate about it, do you remember the film Midnight Express?
Yeah, yes, yeah, gruesome movie, yes.
Midnight Express,
Not a nice
everybody,
movie.
look it up, okay? And I've said that from the day that I moved here to people, don't bring drugs into Russia. Don't.
Right.
Oh, but it's only marijuana oil. It's like, no, it's a drug. It's a controlled substance. Don't bring it in. And in the case of Fogle, he knew as a diplomat and knowing the law was flagrant about it. I mean, and I think that irritated the authorities even more. Is that you abused your diplomatic status? I mean, diplomats do it all the time to bring their stuff in and out. Okay, but when it comes to being a teacher, being having access to children, people are very conservative here. They did that. That is like was he doing it? I don't know. But I mean, is that something that interests your mind? Well, of course it does. Okay. You have easy access. Okay. So I don't have any idea who the Russian citizen is. I maybe as we're doing this, we'll find out. What does it portend? I mean, George is again the salient question here. Is this part of something or is this a one-off? Was this in the works? And this is just as like an epiphenomenon. It just happened as the Munich Security Conference is coming up on Friday. I don't know. I don't know if they're connected here. What is interesting, Steve Witkoff's private jet picked this guy up.
Right.
And
Yes.
so I was going to my studio to do my recording, and then this, there's it's on Twitter, and then the Russian news agencies picked it up, and I said it to one of my guests before we started. And I said, "Don't say anything because his airplane is here. Doesn't mean he's here, okay?" And apparently he wasn't. But using, I mean, that's a we don't know how close these two gentlemen are, Trump and Whitcock. But I mean, can you send your private jet and pick up this
I
guy?
get the impression that, right now they are quite close.
Yeah,
I'd say,
I would assume so. And it's one of these things too, is that this again is this tells us so much how Trump thinks, is that these things when they happen slowly, 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 and then they happen.
Right.
That's how these things work. And did this Trump just pick up them? Can you send your plane and pick them up? Okay, great. Yeah. Boom.
Right.
He didn't have to go through, Pete Hegseth. He didn't have to go, he just went straight for the goal.
Yep.
Okay. And so obviously I was thinking as this was being reported, oh, this is a potential behind the scenes icebreaker before Munich, maybe get some ducks lined up. This is what we're going to talk about. Well, it didn't happen. I am still of the position, and I think George will concur, they really have no idea what they're doing when it comes to Ukraine.
Right. No,
That's
I think so. I think there's a separate issue because one has to remember that even during the Biden years, the worst of the Biden years, there were these regular
Yep.
major swaps. I mean, we had Brittany Griner, and that swap was with Victor Bout. Quite a dramatic because Victor Bout was a big deal that the Russians got him back.
The
And then
Russians got the better of the deal.
yeah, that's right. I think they got the better of it. And then there was also the Wheeler. What was it? What was it? Wasn't his name Wheeler or
Yeah,
Whelan? Paul Whelan. Paul Whelan.
well, yeah, forgotten Paul.
Exactly, Paul Whelan. But that was again a very complicated, very extensive swap involving a number of different countries.
And
So
in that case is I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you're a believer in lie detector tests, but I'd like that guy to take one. I mean, his story was so
right.
bizarre.
Right.
Okay.
No, I think, and then there was, of course, the Wall Street Journal reporter,
Oh,
Gershkovich, who clearly was spying. I mean, it's like, I mean,
he got. I mean, he was just, that's just varsity
right,
leagues.
right.
He
I
just
mean,
got caught red-handed. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So they did happen on the Biden. Trump, of course, has made this into a very dramatic thing. Late in the evening at the White House, and this big congressional delegation. There's the House Speaker standing next to him, and of course there's Steve Witkoff and everything. The story has it, and I mean I can't vouch for it. Is that according to Sean Hannity, that Witkoff met Putin personally for 3.5 hours. We don't. Nobody's vouching for this. It hasn't been confirmed by anyone, but that's
We know his
Hannity's
airplane
claiming.
was here. We know his airplane was here. That's
Right.
all.
And that's anyway. But we should put out there that there was a claim that they met for 3.5 hours, which would be a very long meeting. Um, but yeah, I don't see that there's anything more to this than at the moment. I mean, who knows what happens? It is true that Trump being Trump, Trump spoke very warmly about the Russians. He spoke warmly about Putin. Said, "Oh, they were very nice. It was a very very good deal. Blah blah." And Marco Rubio, who said, that this, well, this may the first step may well be the first step towards a definite improvement of relations. And I think Mike Waltz said that, well, maybe now we can move towards resolution of the Ukraine problem. And so Trump in public, and therefore all of his employees, they're all doing the routine of, well, we got to bring this war to an end. This is a terrible war. This is really stupid war. Horrible, terrible, terrible. We need to bring this to an end. But I think we're in agreement that at the moment, as things stand, it's very hard to see how this can be
Okay, all
accomplished.
right. Let me rephrase what George is saying. Do the Russians score any points when it comes to Ukraine? No, none. It's a one-off. It's a prisoner exchange.
It's a
That's it.
prisoner. I
That's
think so,
it.
because, yeah,
That's it.
because if
You don't need a prisoner exchange to start engaging. Okay, you don't need the Munich Security Conference. You don't need any of these things. As I keep pointing out, the Russians have their demands, their roadmap, their peace plan. It's hard. It's been made public. It's easy. Go to the Kremlin website. You'll find out what they want. Okay.
right, right.
So
No, that's right. I mean, Russians have made clear what they want. The American side. I mean, again, we don't know. we have to say we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I think something is probably going on behind the scenes. I mean, I think that's a reasonable bet. They're talking about it, so I would have to assume some kind of negotiations are taking place. Where they go or anything like that. I mean, that's a different issue. Munich is, I think, a little irrelevant here because the Russians aren't going to be at Munich. So since there's no Russian presence in Munich, then it doesn't really matter because Zelensky just says this, Zelensky says that.
Well, but
The
they're saying we're going to
Europeans
make
say
an
this, say
announcement.
that. There's nothing more to discuss.
Trump's peace plan will be announced in Munich. I mean, that's the last, maybe we'll hear something different later today. That's the reason why I brought it up. Okay. Why do you have to announce it at the Munich Security Conference?
Right. But I don't think there's going to be any announcement of a peace plan. I think
I
that
don't
to,
either.
to,
I
to
don't
the
either.
to the extent that anything is going to happen and to the extent there's going to be diplomacy, I think there's going to be talks about talks. I mean, I think that you're going to have to, let's agree to meet at some level somewhere, and then we'll talk about the possibility of having negotiations, and then we can talk about the possibility of a peace conference or whatever. But it's going to be a long process. Not going to put out a peace plan because you put out a peace plan, it gets shot down right away. So that there's just no, it doesn't make any
There'll,
sense.
there'll be talks about possibly considering diplomacy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's at the level at which we're at. I mean, you have to think. I mean, that's when no one has really spelled out anything, and all of the talk about this peace plan or this is what Trump envisages and so on. There's no basis for it. I mean, because no one has ever outlined this. This is all essentially these are things that appear in stories in the Daily Mail, in Strana, but essentially they're just warmed over variants on an article written a year ago by Keith Kellogg. They're just recycling the Keith Kellogg article and thinking, oh well, that must be the basis for the peace plan.
Well, what the hell is he doing, Kellogg?
I know it.
I don't know. I don't know who his press people are, but he does have nice official portraits, pictures of himself, turning his head, looking up,
He looks
very,
distinguished. He looks like a
very
retired general.
Napoleonic, in a way. Okay.
Yes.
A little bit of Churchill peppered on top. Okay. But who the hell is this guy and what is he doing? Okay. It doesn't look like to me that he hasn't been given a Kissinger-like mandate
No, I
or
don't think so either.
settle diplomacy.
I don't think so. But it's a very peculiar setup with Trump because you have Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, but where is he? He just seems like a kind of a bit
I have a
bland for the whole
theory
thing.
that most of the time Marco Rubio is holding Trump's beer. And by the way, Trump doesn't drink. So
Oh, I think
I
so.
mean that makes him even more of into a fool.
He
Okay.
doesn't exactly. He just doesn't. I mean, part of it, I think, is his presence. He doesn't command a presence. He doesn't have that Secretary of State look. The kind of tall, distinguished presence. Well, that's the U.S. Secretary of State. They usually like John Foster Dulles or William Rogers, Cyrus Vance. These handsome, waspy types. Rubio doesn't have that look. So he always seems like, where's Rubio? Because he doesn't seem to be in the room anywhere. So
Well, also you get the impression, given Rubio's history in the Senate, Rubio is spending a lot of time learning his new lines.
right,
Okay.
right,
What did Trump say about this one? Oh, what did he think about this? Okay. Because he's going through a metamorphosis. Okay. And usually a metamorphosis is like, you go from like a worm to a butterfly. Well, he's just, he's a germ turning into a germ.
right.
Okay. So, there's no positive evolution here. I'm not cutting that guy any slack at all,
No,
George.
I don't think so either. And I think it's very interesting, because he may be that he is laying the foundations
Of
for a
course.
resignation. So he
Of course.
resigns in a huff. And I think as we'll discuss in the next video, if Trump's foreign policy falls flat and Trump himself falls flat on the face,
Who's
there
standing in the wings? Who's
exactly there'll be a Rubio. So I think he may well just be laying the foundation. Well, if you're going to ignore my advice, I have to go.
Yeah, and in the meantime, his bailiwick has always been the Western Hemisphere. So, he'll muck around there, score some points. Oh, you know why? Because he's the Cuban vote in Dade County, things that can change things, okay? And I think he's going to be extremely special interest, very much beholden to the interests of lobbyists and donors. He's he's Secretary of State now. That is a parking spot for him, a parking spot.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so what he does, he leaves the Senate. Laura Trump gets to swoop in, take the seat. Thank you, Marco, little Marco, pat him on the head.
Right.
And then Marco Rubio has some cachet. But I think he's plotting over the next 18 months to, because I'm sorry, everybody, maybe it's unfair too early, but we already know Donald Trump. And 3 weeks in, this foreign policy thing is just,
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave that for
all right, all
the
right.
next video. So anyway, but as far as this goes, I mean, it's nice. It's always good, for a
Yeah,
humanitarian event. We have to be happy for him, for his family, and he seemed, there was something very moving about him. He was quite eloquent and spoke very well about, about the Russians. Talk about the challenges of being in prison. It's challenging anywhere.
how did
It,
he look health-wise, George?
he looked okay. He did not look emaciated. I have to say, he did not look emaciated. And I think,
Look, everybody,
but before you go on, I mean, that point was in fact made by Trump, and Trump contrasted his appearance with the appearance of the hostages, the Israeli hostages released
not
on.
the Palestinian hostages,
What?
not the Palestinian hostages,
Yeah, exactly, the Israeli hostages. Yeah,
Israeli hostages.
exactly.
Okay, yeah, all righty. So, look, I have to echo what George just said there. I'm not a big incarcerate, what is it, to a big prison guy. Okay. I'm glad he's out. I'm glad the Russian's out. Okay. But for me, it doesn't portend anything.
No, I
I
don't.
don't see any meaning in it.
No,
Okay.
no, no.
And you can say, I thank you, Mr. Putin. Thank you, the Russian people. Thank you, Russian penal system, like, whatever. It doesn't change Russian foreign policy.
No, 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 no. I think because, and this has all been part of a consistent. If it went on during the Biden years. So this is it's a despite the terrible relations during the Biden years, they still did the humanitarian thing of releasing people from custody. So unless something dramatic happens within the next 24, 48 hours to say, hey, wow, some major meeting is going to be arranged, Lavrov meets Rubio or something. I mean, unless anything like that happens, I think we have to say, well, it's a humanitarian gesture separate from anything else.
Okay, last two things. There are whispers and rumors that talks are happening. Well, maybe the talks were the prisoner exchange. Okay, right. Maybe that's what the talks were. All right, because you say talks are involved, but you don't necessarily know what the topic is. Number two, as I started out, Midnight Express. Everyone, do not travel with drugs,
Never.
particularly to
Do
the
not do
Russian
it.
Federation. It doesn't matter who you are. Okay. Okay. Look at Paul McCartney. He got stopped in Japan. Okay. And they let him go. Okay. And they kept the cannabis, but they let him go. All right. That doesn't happen here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. No, I think most countries other than Europe and the United States have very, very strict laws about drugs. Don't go there. I mean, just absolutely. If you,
Singapore has that caning thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's where they
That,
whip you with
that's
salt.
that's pretty brutal. Yeah, but most countries, whether you talk about Turkey, but anywhere else, they take drugs very, very seriously. So don't do it.
Won't do it. All right, everybody. This is the first of two that we're going to do today. This is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. George has his solo tomorrow.
Exactly. So Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join me. Come with the questions, comments, suggestions, and then think about these dogs. They're in a foul mood. I mean, I mean, even Peter's getting a little nervous of them. They're in a foul mood. They want that tip jar moving in the right direction, and when it's not, then they get very, very upset. So
Apple is like beating me up right now.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and they're very violent. These Chihuahuas, they may be small, but they pack a punch. So um, remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.